if you've been finding yourself stuck in this same negative loop that feels like a spiral, first of all, it's normal. We've all been through that, and it's okay. Secondly, what if all of these obstacles and perceived setbacks that you're going through right now were just adding fuel towards your next breakthrough? And I want to start off by a quote that I always think of when I'm going through those challenging times, that no matter what I do, it feels like I haven't caught a break in a while, is a quote by John F. Kennedy, who said, "Do not pray for easy lives, pray to be stronger men." And that always gives me comfort, because just like the seasons, we have winters, we have springs, summers, and falls. And in our life, we naturally go through that same sort of cycle. And so when I feel like I've been stuck in a winter for a prolonged period of time, I know that invariably springs always follow winters. And I just have to endure what I'm going through now and learn as much as I can. Because one thing that's always been true for me is that I never learn as much about myself as I do when I'm going through a winter. Springs are easy, summers are easy. That's when it just feels like you get a coast through life. But really, it's the challenges that we face that are the things that polish us. Just like the stone that becomes polished through friction, where all those rough edges are slowly ground away through little bits of contact, of bouncing through life a little bit and feeling like you're pinballing through life a little bit. But eventually, you're finding your direction through the misdirection of being pinballed around. So in this video, I want to talk about some of the experiences and the mindsets that I use to get me through those winters so that you can help yourself through yours. And so my name's Travis. I help people strengthen their body and mind so that they can create their ideal lifestyle. And I've been doing that for 10 years as a personal trainer and a physical therapist, as well as all of these lessons that I've learned through my own process of getting lost and then finding my way. And when I look back, I always become grateful for the winters, because as I said earlier, in my experience, they've provided the most benefit. But to make that process and the ascension through the winter into spring easier for you, I first want to start with a mindset principle that I use, which is make yourself proud whenever possible. Because there are always things in life that are going to happen that are totally out of your control. Even when it comes to your daily routine, there's a certain time that you have to show up for work. There's a certain time that you can leave. You don't really know what types of events are going to happen throughout the day that are going to throw you off track, whether they be good or bad. But there are always things that you have control over in your own internal environment, as well as your own space. Everything within your control, which is you can decide when you wake up, you can decide when you go to bed, what you eat, when you exercise, how you exercise. And even when you get all of those controllable factors dialed in, it naturally creates an improvement in your mood or your mindset. Because when we're tired or we're feeling sick or low energy or brain fog, it's a lot harder to see clearly and be positive as much as we can, because it's a choice. And it becomes essentially a mental exercise, because we have to direct our focus in a way that is uplifting rather than something that tears us down. And so having control over our nightly routine and our morning routine a lack of sleep is going to have many cognitive effects that won't allow you to exert that type of mental exercise very efficiently. And even when it comes to the physical exercise, there's going to be a physiological change, not only in your body, but neurochemically in your brain that will enhance your mood. It's just like tapping into, as I've said before, the pharmacy within our brain that we can now self-medicate with antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications. We know the behaviors that will help support our own pharmacy in our brains. And so when you do those things, the other important factor is acknowledging yourself for them. At the end of the day, reflect on yourself and the things that you did. And when you did control, whether it's one or two or all of them, give yourself credit for that. I actually began journaling in my early 20s for this reason. And I always thought that that was kind of silly. And I was even a little embarrassed doing it at first, because in my mind, I always thought, well, if somebody ever were to find out and they'd think that I'm writing in a diary or something like that, that would be super embarrassing. And I never wanted anybody to find that out. But the purpose for me doing that was using it as a tool that I could now acknowledge myself and write on paper, right, and hold myself accountable to the things that I know I need to do or should do versus the things that I did do and I did do well. And I could write down that I accomplished these things today, and that made me feel good. And even sometimes I would say, I feel proud, or you should feel proud for completing X, Y, and Z. And it became my own report card in a way, but purely for the sake of it being a positive effect, not using it to constantly degrade myself by the things that I didn't do, of always putting a positive spin on it. Because I feel like as you get older, there's obviously more of an independence, but there could be even more of a loneliness as well. When you don't have your parents around and it's just you, who's going to be supporting you? Especially if you get to a point where you have a family and you're the parent and you're in charge of everyone else, who's going to be in your corner? And having a relationship and a spouse and really good friends is great. We all need those things, but they're never going to be spending as much time with you as you are. And you're always going to be the most important person. So you have to be your own best critic, cheerleader, and supporter and fan. And being able to honestly analyze your day and say that you did what you were supposed to should make you feel happy and confident in yourself that you have the tools and you're taking control of everything that you can and letting everything else go. And this brings me to my next point, which is when you do control those things, you're breaking the pattern. And it's important to break the old pattern so that you can start creating space for the new. And along with those other things that I said about controlling when you get up or when you go and exercise and all these other things, something I always found helpful for me is, like I already mentioned, we have to go to work, or we have these schedules, we have places to be, but we could also control when we get there, how we get there, and something as simple as just taking a different route to work or taking a different route home has always been helpful for me. It's a good little reminder, not only to stay conscious of your day and aware of the patterns that you're continuing to perform, and also being aware that you're trying to create a new one. And it even comes back to a classical conditioning idea in my mind. Just like with Pavlov's dog and the ringing of the bell and creating the saliva, and you pair these two stimuli close enough together that becomes a pattern and a routine in itself. So if you're driving the same way to work every day, and imagine there's this big orange or big yellow billboard that catches your attention every day, but every time you look at it, you're already in a terrible mood. Or same thing when you're going home. When you're stuck in these patterns, that type of stimulus will further ingrain that same pattern, to where even one day, if you're feeling neutral, but you see that same billboard that catches your attention every day when you're in a bad mood, now just the sight of that big yellow or orange billboard that catches your attention will now reaffirm the emotion in that normal pattern that you've been in when that stimulus or that sight has been paired with an everyday occurrence that you've normally had. And so now by taking a new route or a different route, we can start breaking up these pairings. And I know it sounds simple, but again, that's another lesson in controlling your own environment and controlling the controllables. Because that way too, with all these different things that are changing, at least when you can be in a different state and pair that with different scenes or different ways to work, and even changing the radio station, listening to different music, all of these things play a role and become a factor in these everyday routines and habits that we built up, even though it may not seem like it. But it's important to become very aware of these things, because the goal is now to not be a victim, to take control over your day-to-day so that you don't feel like life is happening to you and the world is attacking you. You're going out into the world and having your own say with the things that you can. And so the next thing is educating yourself on the things that you're trying to work on, or whatever problems you may be facing currently, whether it's personally or relationships or with work. I believe in feeding yourself the type of information that will give you more options. And so for me, when I was younger, I was always very anxious and shy, and I just felt like I just was unlucky with the genetic draw, if you will. I just had the personality that was not fit to be sociable or a social butterfly or socially confident. But when I was 19, I came across a book that was called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And that changed my life, because in that moment, I realized I don't have to be this way. There are skills that I can learn and develop so that this thing that makes me really uncomfortable in my life, that instilled a lot of fear in me, because we have to talk to people every day. If I wanted to get a job, get into a good school, find a girlfriend or a wife, I have to be able to talk to people and do it in a way that leaves a good impression or is uplifting or positive to people or engaging. Something that would not be me projecting my insecurities and fears on this situation, that now just creates in a way of cloud of discomfort or awkwardness or anxiety. And by reading that book and applying those lessons and seeing the change in the world around me, I became addicted to that, so that I started looking at my mind as a computer, and every new book that I can get my hands on, or every new topic that I felt was necessary for the path that I was going down, I could essentially take that program and download it into my software. I'm not good with electronics. I don't know how any of that stuff works, but you can understand the metaphor to where I can buy this thing, and just with the investment of my time, learn the material, integrate it into my life, and see the effects around me. That again goes back to number one, which is having control over the things that I have control over. I didn't have control over my genetics or my upbringing, but I do have control over how I respond to it and what I do in spite of that. If that means I have to work a little harder on one area of my life to overcome certain insecurities or a lack of skills, so be it. But that's why the winters can become even more positive and beneficial. And like I said, in my case, they have always been more positive and beneficial, even though they feel terrible, is that they've always pushed me to become a better version of myself. They've always expanded who I was internally so that my growth thereafter can then take up the space. And then I can continue growing outward until, again, the next winter, because just like seasons, they come and go every year. And your life will always have the changing seasons. And so when you realize that, it becomes easier to not put so much pressure on yourself, which is my last point, because it's normal and we all go through it. And the last thing that you should do is put so much pressure on yourself that creates tension that essentially is only reinforcing that same negative state that you're in. We want to try to work with where you are and then slowly make changes, just one little thing at a time, just to break that pattern of that emotional and that energetic state that you're in, and doing it in a way that's more of a dance rather than a wrestling match. Because it's important to work with yourself through this process. It's not your fault and you're not to blame, but you do have control over how you're responding to all of these things, whether it be physical or emotional. But again, this time is more about self-acceptance. And if you believe that it will eventually get better, and you believe in the idea of the seasons and that your life goes through these ups and downs, then it's only a matter of time. But the best way to speed up that process is to live in acceptance now and plan for the future, so that when those opportunities arrive, you'll be ready to take advantage of them. And really, in this process too, don't think about changing everything all at once. Again, you don't need to put that kind of extra tension on yourself. You only need to start with one thing. And once that becomes more routine and you're feeling better about it, and you're a little bit more positive or a little bit more motivated, which you don't necessarily have to be motivated or have all this willpower to make all these changes. That's why just starting with one is important and will make an effect. Then when you're ready, move on to the next one. And then don't worry about anything else. And just focus on that next thing, whatever it may be, and just slowly chip away at it until you feel comfortable with that. And then so on and so forth. And eventually, you just start stacking up wins so that on average, you feel a little bit better than you did on average 2 weeks ago. And then 2 weeks go by and you feel a little bit better on average than you did 2 weeks prior. And you just slowly take one step at a time. And so I hope these ideas resonate with you. And if you've made it this far, thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions for me regarding your specific circumstance, you could email me at my email in the description. Otherwise, until then, I'll see you in the next video.